Tonight, the manhunt in Ferguson, Missouri enters a second day as police search for the gunman or men responsible for shooting 2 police officers. This as leaders and community activists in Ferguson and other cities work to find ways to improve community police relations. Some suggest it could start with policing for profit, or cops focusing too much on the department's bottom line as opposed to public safety. Also, the debate over medical marijuana takes an emotional turn. Tonight, we hear from the mother of a 4-year-old girl who suffers from a rare form of epilepsy. She'll explain why she's backing a bill about medical marijuana proposed by Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and others. Also, disturbing video out of Brooklyn has people sounding off. A girl brutally beaten by an angry mob of her peers, and no one steps in to help. Does the public have a responsibility to do better? Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman. Richard French has the night off. Thanks so much for joining us. We begin with the latest from Ferguson, Missouri, where the hunt continues for whomever shot 2 police officers on the night the embattled town's police chief stepped down earlier this week. Police say they have a number of leads, but have not identified any specific suspects, contrary to some reports. Meanwhile, state and county police will now take over security at protests, which were far more sedate last night, thanks in part to rain in the area. Now, there are, of course, any number of problems facing police and the community in Ferguson, and many are not exclusive to that Missouri community. One of the first complaints following the death of Michael Brown was that police in Ferguson unfairly targeted black residents for traffic and other stops. And the recent Justice Department report identified one reason why: money. That the police, the court system, and even the municipal government needed the financial rewards that came with targeting so many of its own residents. In fact, just under 1/4 of the entire Ferguson budget comes from fines and fees generated by the town's municipal court system, almost all of which begin with the police department. And this is a trend that goes just beyond law and order complaints and goes well beyond Ferguson. Most of us have gotten a parking ticket at one time or another, and you thought, well, you always hear about cuts to police departments, but they never seem to cut the people who write the tickets. And you'd be right. If you've ever driven to Washington, D.C., you know how complicated and confusing parking rules and signs are there. It's also very profitable. They generate $92 million a year from parking tickets. In New York City, they make more than $500 million every year from parking tickets, and they make close to $1 billion from all motor vehicle tickets. And there are so many more examples where the genuine desire to protect people and laws runs squarely into municipal and governmental profits. Take speed traps. People who drive too fast do endanger others, but they're not always the most dangerous people on the road, and yet those tickets are big business and big bucks for police departments and courts. So much so that departments are increasingly taking the labor cost out of the process with red light cameras and speed cameras to catch even more drivers and make even more money. Getting away from the roads, when I investigated marijuana arrests in New York City, even though low-level marijuana possession has been decriminalized, surprised to see a profit motive there too. Overtime pay for police, fees for the courts when cases are prosecuted. And finally, maybe the most obvious police profit center, civil asset forfeiture. If you're not familiar with it, it's a law that allows police to capture and prosecute money and goods used in the commission of a crime, but that's been expanding rapidly in recent years, leading police to seize homes, cash, and more. It's very difficult for people to get their stuff back, even if they're never convicted. And departments often get to keep all or part of what they seize, leading to more and more traffic stops where you get questions from officers like these.
Is there any large amounts of cash in the vehicle?
Are there any large sums of money over $5,000 in cash in the vehicle?
How much money you got?
Are there large amounts of U.S. currency in there?
They're seizing the cash. We want to bring in the panel tonight. TJ McCormick is a Republican consultant. Welcome back to the show. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author and lover of panelists. Welcome again tonight. And Scott Vanderhoff is with us, an attorney and former 5-term Rockland County executive. And you know, this is something of a general topic, and it is an issue in Ferguson, but it is an issue everywhere else too, because let's face it, governments do set up these fines and penalties, and part of the incentive is that it helps pay some of the bills for these municipalities. And Scott, where does the balance have to be? Because anytime you put a profit motive on a police activity, you run the risk of really ramping up that activity just for the profit.
Well, you do, and there are some villages who for years in the county and Rockland and Orange who lived off of their police forces giving tickets. The good news on that was that it became so prevalent that people actually slowed down to 30 to go in the 30-mile per hour zone because they knew that was one of the keys was setting up these these roadblocks, not roadblocks, but checks for speeding. But the answer is, do you abuse it? Do you use it? And I think that's part of your message here. And the forfeiture laws, by the way, are very good. I mean, a lot of these big drug busts, I know that money comes back into law enforcement. It's helped Rockland County Sheriff's Office and our law department, all the police in Rockland County, some really big busts. So there is a line, I'm sure, between what's proper in terms of law enforcement and the income it produces.
And it's difficult, TJ, because these are issues of law and order. You don't want people driving too fast and endangering other folks. New York City doesn't want people driving in the city as much as they can avoid it, so they really crack down on parking violations and tickets. Sure. But we've all been frustrated seeing the meter reader coming by every 5 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, try to park in the city of White Plains for more than 17 minutes. You just know it. I mean, look, it cut through it. If you parked in White Plains, that you don't get to that car within a moment of it being, expired. There's going to be a guy on it because they have their marching orders. I traverse 684 many, many times any given day, and when you see that state trooper parked in the median, he's not out there finding our number one issue right now, which is texters. You're not going to find somebody texting and driving when you're sitting there in the median. You're going to wait for somebody who's doing, 67. And so what's he doing? Is he looking for the fine or looking to protect us? Again, to me, the big problem right now is texting and driving. That is so prevalent out there, and you're not going to find them from the median. Don't tell me you're looking out for my best interest when you're parked in the median.
I don't understand what the issue is here, because this is modern day budgeting. That's what it comes down to.
It is what it is, right?
It is what it is. And if you're the mayor of New York, a large city, it's part of the course. I mean, that's what happens. And if you're the mayor in small town America, this is what happens. But where the problem lies in, if it's only impacting one community per se, then that's a problem, no matter what that community is. But this is modern day budgeting. It happens everywhere in the world.
I'm glad you made that point, because it is a fact of modern day budgeting. But that's in part because nobody wants to raise taxes.
That's the only reason why it's
governments
done.
and police forces and every agency, courts, they need money to keep operating. But Scott, nobody wants to be the guy who's responsible for raising taxes. So you do it with fees, and you do it with fines, and you do it with penalties, which, at least in my mind, unfairly impacts the people who can least afford it.
Yeah, well, you're right. And because the politicians, all of us, want to get elected again, and we don't want to have to raise taxes if we don't want to. But going back to Dominic's point, there is one issue here, and that is if you place your policemen, police forces on just doing radar, you may be missing other elements of law, and that may include the dog who's sitting in the front seat of your car, and people texting or what have you. And so it's not perhaps as simple as simply raising money. There really is an issue about where do you deploy law enforcement officers in any community. With the meter readers, they don't have to worry about it because they just stand and wait for you to, wait for those meters to. Yeah. But it really is an issue that should be discussed.
And when you reach into the pockets of your own community, I mean, it's one thing. Anytime you cross a state line, there's like a 50% chance there's going to be a cop on the other side of the state line, and they want to get the out-of-state driver so that you issue a ticket, and the odds are they're not going to be able to show up in court and fight the ticket. But when you poach on members of your own community, like they've done in Ferguson, and particularly one group in the community, it can really deteriorate relationships in the community. I mean, we talk about separation between police and the people that they're policing. That seems like a classic way to do it.
Well, sure, yeah, and look, to start connecting the dots in Ferguson, now we have two, shot cops. And by the way, that was the entree to all this. We have 2 cops who were shot. I feel like I want to scream that from the mountaintops. I conveniently have a camera in front of me to do it. It's hard to rationalize the policing for profit, and we got a new phrase, don't we? A new catchphrase.
But it's not policing for profit. I mean, are we that naive to believe that we don't think this has been going on for decades? I mean, it's part of budgeting. If you'll make sure, if you're the mayor, you're not going to cut the people that are generating, or if you're the county executive, and the county executive did do a better job of explaining than I did. Of course, you don't want to just focus on crime fighting initiatives that are going to raise revenue. You focus on other things, but you better believe you have those officers and those agents out there to raise money.
It's also a chicken or the egg thing too. We're also talking about the greater picture here of out of control spending. I mean the unfunded mandates that are being handed down. I am a Republican consultant. It's unfunded mandates that are being handed down from the state. You've got local municipalities that are absolutely drowning in out of control contracts and craziness at that level. You got public sector. You know,
it's also no politician wants to touch the third rail of raising taxes.
Yeah, but I mean, TJ's point, counties particularly are getting killed in these mandates. We talk about it to the point where people just get fed up with it, but it's a serious, serious issue.
All right, we're going to hit our first break here on RFL. When we come back, stop me if you've heard this before. Rudy Giuliani puts his foot in his mouth again. He has more digs for President Obama. First, he says the commander-in-chief doesn't love America. Now he's saying Obama should be more like Bill Cosby. I want the reaction of our panel after the break. And tonight, by the way, it's Friday. It's trivia night. We're going to open up our phone lines in just a few minutes. Be sure to give us a call, 888-766-2428 to participate. I'm not going to ask you about policing for profit. I will ask you some trivia questions about the news. Answer the questions correctly, you win a mug, and it's got the name of this program on it, so you can remember to tune in every night at 6 o'clock. Call in, get a mug, answer some questions. We're back after this.
I need a mug with that water in it.